Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here. Can puppets be scary? Well, that's a very interesting question, and I think it goes all the way back to... You made me jump, Henson. I guess that they can be scary. In this episode, folks, Puppet Master. In Puppet Master, an old man called Andre has been secretly bringing his handmade puppets to life, which attracts the attention of a pair of Nazis. Andre decides to hide the puppets and shoots himself before the Nazis arrive. Years later, the death of a man called Neil attracts a group of sidekicks to the very hotel that Andre hid the puppets and committed suicide in. While the sidekicks do some investigating, the puppets start killing people in the hotel one by one. Even as a fan of puppetry who can see the charm and magic in the craft of bringing objects to life, I will admit that marionettes, dummies and dolls have the ability to be quite creepy, whether intentional or not. So it's no surprise that many filmmakers have tried to create horror movies using puppets. However, I'm afraid that Puppet Master is not a good example of the subgenre done right, as it made me yawn more than scream. This is a tediously boring movie, one that really failed to keep me invested or engaged. Everything is so sluggishly directed, without ever giving us solid reasons to patiently wait for what's ahead, and it drags out as a result. Right from the get-go, I struggle to resonate with this film, because it feels like we've been thrown into the later part of a story. Beginning this movie is like starting a TV show 20 episodes in, or reading a book from chapter 3. The introduction to these characters is very rushed. We're not given enough time to get familiar with them. You may be thinking, well, doesn't this create an air of mystery and make you want to learn more? No. The film doesn't open up in a way that provokes me to desire to know more. It begins with such little information that I was waiting for reasons to actually start caring first before I wanted to discover more details. Heck, the movie doesn't even slowly paint a picture or pepper information into the story as it goes along. It just chucks big exposition dumps into the narrative now and again. So it's less about creating some kind of mystery and more along the lines of bad writing. To be honest though, watching more of the film doesn't help us to gradually care about these characters, let alone like them. I wasn't fussed whether these people got killed or not. There's so little to these characters' personalities. They're not insufferable enough to make us cheer for their deaths, but they're also not likeable enough to persuade us to hope that they'll live. Not to mention, the acting from all the leads is really awful. It's like we're watching a cheesy soap opera TV show. All the performances are either wooden or melodramatic. These actors only have two ranges: loud and over the top, or quiet and stiff. No one comes across as natural.
It's time to die, Alex.
Stop it!
So you can live forever.
Stop!
Okay, let's talk about the puppets. I'll be frank, I didn't find these puppets to be scary in the slightest. Their designs are way too over the top, and they look like they're trying too hard to be scary. It would have been more unsettling if they looked like normal friendly puppets. There's something more relatable and unnerving about seeing everyday inanimate objects come to life. This is why Child's Play struck a chord with people. Audiences have seen playthings like the Good Guy doll, toys that are made to look appealingly sweet to kids but have a disturbing uncanny valley to them, making us fear that just maybe they could come to life. Also, these are puppets that were supposed to be made by an innocent old man. Why do they look like they were designed to frighten people? Well, so they could be intentionally scary later on in the film, of course, which doesn't make sense in the context of the puppet's backstory. It's never implied that Andre was secretly evil. Heck, we learn very little at all about him before he dies. However, I do get the appeal of these puppets. There's a wide variety of them, and each have a distinct wacky personality that sets them apart from each other. Fans can pick a favourite, and I can see why the film would gain a cult following thanks solely to the charm of these kooky, morbid marionettes. I just don't think that they work for this particular story. They feel like they belong in a different movie, one that's more comedic, self-aware and cartoony. Now, the movie does try to imply that these puppets aren't inherently evil, and that they're just being controlled by Neil, who wants to use alchemy to experiment with immortality, and has been using the dolls as his test subjects. When Neil carelessly throws one puppet aside, the others look upset at the idea of their own kind being abused, so they brutally kill Neil in front of the other humans. Which stops me from believing that these puppets weren't built for evil, because they are capable of being cruel, and this begs the question, if they can be this violent and merciless, if pushed too far, why bother having a puppet master in this story? Anyway, what about the puppetry itself? Well, you can tell that the movie's low budget has limited the flexibility of each puppet, and corners have been cut, meaning that we can always tell that the puppeteers are present, and that stops us from believing that these are marionettes moving on their own. The movie tries to atone for this by including stop motion effects, but this just creates a jarring illusion, because we can tell when a shot was animated through stop motion and which bits were done with hand puppetry. These technical transitions are far from smooth and quite distracting. Don't get me wrong, it's impressive stop motion for such a cheap movie, but it just ends up being too noticeable because it looks so different to the hand puppetry. To save lots of money and effort, the filmmakers are very reliant on angles from the puppet's point of view. Not only does this give away the film's budget, but there are many shots that just don't make sense. Why would the hotel residents not notice a little creepy puppet running around the building? It doesn't add up. To conclude, I thought The Puppet Master was a tedious and stale movie, one that struggles to click all its ideas and technical aspects together neatly. It tries to compensate for its lack of competence and budget with gratuitous content, but shameless sex and violence can't make up for boring characters, clumsy storytelling, awful acting, unconvincing puppetry, or inconsistent effects. In all fairness, I'd forgive this movie's dumb trashiness if it was an intentional fun comedy, but it's not self-aware enough to embrace its sense of humour. It has chances to be tongue-in-cheek or wink at the audience, yet it doesn't take them. It's very honest about being a serious horror drama full of tragedy, but it fails to pull off this tone because the execution is so melodramatic, schlocky, and silly. With all this being said though, I'm well aware that this film has an audience out there, a cult following that's inspired the filmmakers to produce loads of sequels. It's just that personally, I'm not a fan of this one. Maybe I'll like one of the sequels, I don't know, we'll have to see. I've been Jambareeqi and I hope you enjoyed this review. If you did, then feel free to subscribe to my channel because I make a lot of videos like this one. I also encourage you to consider supporting me on my Patreon with a monthly pledge. It would be greatly appreciated and I'll be giving you some awesome rewards in return. Thank you. I'd also like to remind people that this month marks my 5th year anniversary on YouTube. To celebrate, I'll be holding a countdown where you all decide the entries. If you'd like to take part in this project, then click in the link in the description box below. So, what am I going to be reviewing for the next episode of Puppet Panic? Well, it's time that I covered the Country Bears. Oh boy. Cheerio, folks.